When you're not sure what to do or how to feel or what to think, which is going to happen a lot, especially when you're working towards your own nutrition and fitness goals. I want you to choose to look at your situation from a different perspective. And there's three questions that I want you to keep in mind throughout this whole journey and honestly for the rest of your life that can kind of help ground you and help you look at your situation or your roadblocks or your obstacles or failures through a new lens. And these will help guide you and help you make better decisions going forward. And it's something that you will probably hear from me at one point or another on our coaching calls going forward. But the first question is, what would 90-year-old me say, think, or want in this particular situation? The second question is, what would I tell my best friend if they were in my position or if they were in my situation? And the third question is, what would I want for my kids if you have kids or if you have imaginary kids? What would I want for my kids if they were in my position? And I want you to imagine using these questions as your compass when working towards your nutrition and fitness goals. And I'll give you some examples. Let's say you have a big business weekend coming up, or you're traveling, or you're meeting family, or you're going out with your spouse and you're leaving town. Should you track food and stress about hitting all the numbers and eating all the right foods while you're on vacation or while you're away from home? Question to ask yourself is, what would 90-year-old me say to that? I'd hope your 90-year-old self would say, chill out, enjoy your weekend, know that one day or one weekend is not going to derail your progress. And I don't want you to take, food tracking and the stress over eating food, letting that take away from your experience that you have that weekend. So keeping that in mind. Another example could be, maybe you feel discouraged because you weighed yourself and you only lost a half a pound this last week. Ask yourself, what would I tell my best friend who is in the same situation, that feels that same way? Hopefully you would say, that's pretty badass. You lost a half a pound. You're making progress. The plan is working. And more likely than not, you'd probably use, encouragement to say, hey, everything that you've been doing has been contributing to a consistent weight loss. So a half a pound is better than no weight at all, right? Another example is maybe you come from that restrictive mindset when it comes to food, and maybe you're demonizing carbs and you're stressing about eating perfectly like Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday. And then that contributes to you overeating on the weekends or binge eating. And then all of a sudden you feel guilty and then you start over, and that contributes to that restriction process starting on Monday and Tuesday again. That's a terrible cycle to be in, but I want you to ask yourself, would you want that for your kids or your imaginary kids if you don't have any, right? Typically, we're our own worst enemies, and we're harder on ourselves than we are anybody else. And a lot of times we treat ourselves like shit, especially when we're trying to work towards our specific nutrition goals. And that's because a lot of us have that perfectionist mentality, and we have high expectations of ourselves, which is good. But a lot of times that negative mindset and those limiting beliefs are actually taking away from your progress rather than adding to them. So I want you to remember, do things that would make 90-year-old self you proud, right? I want you to treat yourself like you would treat your best friend, or like you would talk to your best friend. Also, treat yourself like you would want your kids to treat themselves. And honestly, just stop being so hard on yourself all the time. That strategy hasn't been working for you in the past, so we need to change that up. And just be more proud of yourself, and give yourself credit when it's due, because you're doing amazing. And it's when you start to acknowledge those small victories along the way, that's when you start to enjoy the process. And that's when those outcome goals, losing the weight, losing body fat percentage, gaining more muscle, that's when those start to become more real, is when you appreciate the process and appreciate the small victories along the way. So always remember those three questions and ask yourself that constantly.